Welcome. So I'm continuing a series I'm calling Heroes of Living Your Own Life. These are people who, in one way or another, have refused to surrender their soul to the expectations of the crowd. And not because they're perfect or they never doubted themselves, just something within themselves mattered more than fitting in. You could call it the soul covenant. And I think a good addition to the series is Henry David Thoreau. If you've ever felt like you were living somebody else's life or spent years trying to be what everyone else expected you to be, if you've discovered that success without authenticity leaves you feeling empty, then that Thoreau has something to teach us. Most people know just maybe one fact about him. We know that he went to live in the woods, and he wrote, on Walden's Pond. It's somewhere outside of Boston, and his intention was to escape civilization. But it's kind of a misunderstanding, because when you read the book, you realize that he wasn't actually running away from life. This little cabin that he built in the woods was actually only about a mile away from the city. So it's not like he was running away from life. He wasn't choosing a monastic life. He was running toward it, if you like. And there's a big difference, because it's not like he was rejecting humanity. He wasn't a misanthrope. He was rejecting living unconsciously. He wanted to know what it felt like to be fully alive before he died. And he said these words, "I went to the woods to live deliberately." I love that word, deliberately. Not accidentally, not by default, not according to anybody else's script, deliberately. And when Thoreau was going to college, everyone assumed that there was a proper path. It's not so different from today. Build a respectable career, earn money, get married. Sound familiar? Because every generation has its own script. Today, the script might vary in the details, but it's essentially the same. You could talk about build your brand, optimize productivity, stay relevant, keep everyone happy, perform. And then Thoreau quietly asked, but what if that's not my life? And that question is as radical today as it was 175 years ago. And here's something I think that's critical. Walden wasn't written because Thoreau, as I said, hated society, but he loved humanity. He felt compassion for humanity, and he thought that humans were asleep. There's a sentence in Walden that I like. The mass of men and women live lives of quiet desperation. And, he doesn't say loud desperation, quiet, the kind that's hidden behind promotions, nice houses, busy calendars, perfect Instagram feeds, people who smile, while at the same time feeling strangely about their own lives. And I suspect many people pleasers know exactly what he's talking about. Outwardly, everything looks good, but inwardly, there's a subtle grief, resentment, maybe even exhaustion. The feeling that your real life is waiting for you out there in the future, someday, maybe at retirement. So Thoreau wanted to experiment. For a little over 2 years, he lived in the cabin that he built with his own hands. He grew food, he read, he wrote. He wanted to know what life was when you got back to the basics. He walked for hours every day. He observed nature with incredible precision. He wanted to discover the ways in which modern life was unnecessary, how much of our busyness is self-created. So it was a kind of spiritual experiment. when you remove all the noise, what remains? Who remains? That's the question. Because people often imagine freedom as being able to do whatever you want, but that wasn't Thoreau. He meant freedom meant becoming impossible to manipulate. And this wasn't out of stubbornness, but because you no longer need the approval that society uses to control you. Think about it. If someone needs your approval, they're free. If you need theirs, you're not. Here's a line from Walden's Pond. If a man doesn't keep pace with his companions, perhaps it's because he hears a different drummer. What if the deepest wisdom of your life doesn't revolve around everybody else's? Your timing might be different. Your vocation is quirky. Your relationships are different. Your calling is unique. You going to trust that? Or will you betray it just to belong? And this is where Thoreau speaks, I think, directly to what we call people-pleasing, that adaptation we make to unfavorable conditions early in our life, or the adaptations later were set up to in order to belong to society. Because people-pleasing isn't just about being nice. It's about abandoning your own inner authority. You stop listening to your own drummer, your own pace of life, and you start marching to everybody else's. And you become incredibly skilled at listening and watching everyone else's emotional weather. You might even become successful. You're helpful, kind, dependable, admired even. But underneath, there's a feeling that you've left yourself. That's the tragedy, that you never have become who you came here to be. Now, Thoreau had a friendship with another man whose name is Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he's going to be part of this series. And Emerson thinks that every person carried within them a spark of the divine, which I also ascribe to. And that spark he called self-reliance. It wasn't selfishness, but it was the courage to be grounded in the deepest truth you know and to speak that. So Thoreau and Emerson didn't aspire to be successful. They just wanted to be truthful, to speak in their own voice. They didn't care about impressing people. They cared about living honestly. And Thoreau wasn't just a solitary philosopher. He was socially active. He opposed slavery. He spent a night in jail for civil disobedience. And out of that came some of the most influential political essays that have ever been written. They inspired Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, a man who lived by himself for a couple of years by a pond in a house he built, inspired these great moral leaders because he believed that his own conscience has to come before conformity. And he knew that there was a difference between belonging and conforming. Belonging, deep belonging, true belonging, says, I can be fully myself and still be loved. Conforming says, I have to be someone else in order to be accepted. One issues in freedom, the other to this life of quiet desperation. That's why I say that people-pleasing isn't just a bad habit. It's a form of self-abandonment that becomes an entire identity. Because as children, we had to adapt to unfavorable conditions. We had to survive. It was intelligent. The adaptation saved us. But eventually that adaptation began imprisoning us. And Thoreau reminds us that there's another possibility. And it doesn't have to be in a cabin, but it comes from a different center. And that center I call the heart self. Thoreau wrote, if one advances confidently in the direction of his or her dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet success unexpected in common hours. But first, you move confidently in the direction of your dreams, then success. And I sometimes wonder what Walden Pond represents psychologically. And maybe it's that place inside of us, underneath the noise, when we get quiet, underneath obligations, underneath the performance. And in that place, your life has been waiting for you all along. We don't have to move to the woods, but we do have to get quiet. You have to be willing to disappoint some people. Stop performing. Risk being misunderstood. And this is just the price of becoming yourself. So, maybe there's only one question worth asking. Where in your life are you still marching to somebody else's drummer? What would happen if you trusted the quieter rhythm of the pond within? Because you only get one life. It might as well be yours.